September 1st, 1939. Dawn breaks over the Polish countryside, but it brings no peace. Instead, the sky fills with the roar of Luftwaffe engines. German Stuka dive bombers scream down toward Polish airfields, rail junctions, and sleeping towns. This is Blitzkrieg, lightning war, a new kind of warfare the world has never seen. Adolf Hitler had spent years preparing for this moment. Since seizing power in 1933, he had rebuilt Germany's military in open defiance of the Treaty of Versailles. He annexed Austria in 1938, then swallowed Czechoslovakia piece by piece, all while Britain and France chose appeasement over confrontation. Neville Chamberlain returned from Munich promising peace for our time. He was wrong. Poland was next. Hitler manufactured a pretext, a staged attack on a German radio station at Gleiwitz, carried out by SS operatives dressed as Polish soldiers. It was flimsy propaganda, but it gave Germany its excuse. At 4:45 a.m., the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein, docked in Danzig under the guise of a friendly visit, opened fire on the Polish garrison at Westerplatte. On land, over 1.5 million German troops poured across the border in 5 army groups, supported by more than 2,000 tanks and 1,300 aircraft. Poland fought back with courage, but faced impossible odds. Polish cavalry units, still equipped for an earlier era of warfare, were thrown against German armor. The famous myth of Polish horsemen charging tanks with lances is largely exaggerated propaganda, but it captures the desperate imbalance of the fight. Polish infantry and artillery resisted fiercely at Westerplatte, at the Bzura River, and in the skies above Warsaw, where Polish pilots downed dozens of German aircraft before being overwhelmed. 2 days later, on September 3rd, Britain and France honored their guarantee to Poland and declared war on Germany. Chamberlain's voice, weary and grim, crackled over BBC radio. Britain was now at war. Australia, New Zealand, and other Commonwealth nations followed within days. Yet no significant military action came to Poland's aid. In the West, French and British troops largely held their positions along the Maginot Line, a period soon nicknamed the Phony War. Poland's agony deepened on September 17th, when the Soviet Union invaded from the east. This was no surprise attack. It was the secret second half of a bargain. Weeks earlier, on August 23rd, Germany and the USSR had stunned the world by signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty between two supposedly opposite ideologies. Hidden within it was a protocol dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Poland would be split down the middle. Caught between two invading armies, Poland's resistance collapsed. Warsaw endured relentless bombing and artillery bombardment before surrendering on September 27th. The last organized Polish units capitulated by early October. Poland was partitioned once again, as it had been in the 18th century, this time between Nazi Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union. The occupation was brutal from the start. German forces began targeting Polish intellectuals, clergy, and political leaders in operations like Intelligenzaktion, foreshadowing the horrors to come. In the Soviet zone, mass arrests and deportations began, laying groundwork for atrocities such as the Katyn massacre in 1940, when thousands of Polish officers would be executed. Meanwhile, the phony war settled over Western Europe, like a strange fog. French troops made a brief, cautious incursion into the Saar region of Germany, then withdrew. British forces began arriving in France, the British Expeditionary Force digging in alongside their French allies. Propaganda leaflets fluttered down over German cities instead of bombs. Soldiers on both sides waited, uncertain, as their governments debated strategy. Not all of 1939's fighting stayed quiet, though. In the far north, the Soviet Union turned its attention to Finland, launching an invasion on November 30th that would become known as the Winter War. Stalin expected a swift victory. Instead, vastly outnumbered Finnish forces, fighting in brutal sub-zero conditions and using their knowledge of the terrain, inflicted stunning losses on the Red Army at battles like Suomussalmi. The world watched in surprise as tiny Finland humiliated a superpower, even as it was clear Finland could not hold out forever alone. At sea, war had already turned deadly. Just hours after Britain's declaration of war, a German U-boat torpedoed the passenger liner SS Athenia, killing over 100 people, including American citizens, a grim preview of the unrestricted submarine warfare to come. In December, the German pocket battleship Graf Spee, after a campaign raiding Allied shipping in the South Atlantic, was cornered by British cruisers at the Battle of the River Plate off Uruguay. Rather than face destruction, its captain scuttled the ship in Montevideo harbor and took his own life days later. By the close of 1939, the map of Europe had already begun to bleed. Poland ceased to exist as an independent state, carved between two totalitarian powers that, for now, called each other partners. Hundreds of thousands of Polish soldiers, officials, and civilians had been killed, captured, or driven into exile. A Polish government in exile was forming, first in France and later in London, determined to keep fighting. For Britain and France, the war felt strangely distant despite being real. Rationing began. Gas masks were issued. Children were evacuated from London and other major cities in anticipation of bombing raids that, for now, did not come. Factories shifted toward military production, and conscription expanded. The illusion of the phony war gave a deceptive sense that this conflict might remain contained, even as military leaders on both sides understood it was only a pause. Hitler, emboldened by his swift victory, was already planning his next moves. Directive No. 6 for an offensive in the West was drafted before 1939 even ended, though bad weather and internal debate would delay the invasion of France and the Low Countries until the spring of 1940. The United States, still shadowed by the Great Depression and isolationist sentiment, remained officially neutral. President Franklin D. Roosevelt sympathized with the Allies and pushed to revise the Neutrality Acts to allow arms sales on a cash-and-carry basis, a small but meaningful crack in America's wall of neutrality. By December 31, 1939, the world stood at the edge of an abyss it had only begun to glimpse. Poland had fallen. The Soviet Union and Germany were, for the moment, uneasy partners. Finland was bleeding but unbroken. Britain and France had armies mobilized but largely idle. No one yet knew that this was only the opening chapter of a conflict that would eventually stretch across 6 continents, claim tens of millions of lives, and reshape the entire course of human history. The storm had broken. The real fighting was yet to come.